Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. I'm Brian Doyle, and I'm excited to have you all here joining us today. But besides myself, more importantly, we have a special guest today. So I'd like to welcome to MSP Business School Matt Quammen, from the president of Optimize Cyber. I got to know Matt a little bit over the last couple weeks, and he is definitely a personality you want to get to know, and certainly a smart person within the security space that can share a lot to help you improve the services that you're delivering as well. So, Matt, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Brian. That's hard to live up to, but I appreciate the false kind words.
No, not at all. Not at all. Matt and I had a podcast before the podcast when we met each other. So, I was like, yeah, you need to come on here. This is some good information that I think needs to be shared. So, really appreciate, both conversations now, Matt, and thank you for joining. I love to kick things off, though, and certainly the listeners love to understand who is talking to them on the other side. So maybe you can tell us a little bit of your backstory, how you found your way into IT, and then, of course, to the crazy world of MSP, MSSP as well.
Well, I didn't know I was joining the IT world. I got drafted in 14 years ago. I was basically somebody recruited me into Oracle and started out doing technology applications there. At the time, did not love technology. Frankly, still don't love technology just for its own sake. But I do love what technology can do for businesses. About 8 years ago, I started my security journey. Same thing. Was drafted. Said I'm not a security guy, and don't don't want to do it, but was talked into it. And within about 2 weeks, I fell in love with the industry, and I've never looked back.
So, it's funny that you talked a little bit about getting drafted. I think a lot of us found our way into technology accidentally. There's obviously a whole grouping that went for it directly, but a lot of us, fell into that trajectory of, hey, some opportunity presented itself and we got into tech. I had no intention of being in tech. I was actually computer averse when I was a kid. And then, I fell into tech, and I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the concepts, and just like you, it's all about delivering a better outcome for people, right? So, if you kind of have that in mind, and that concept of being a servant to the people that you're working with has always been a big part of what drove me. But what I'd love to learn a little bit is what makes you love security. Because security can be a dry subject sometimes, but it can also be a challenging subject.
Well, I agree. I love simplifying it for business owners. My personal story with security. This goes back to my dad's HVAC company. Growing up, my dad had a mid-sized HVAC company in Minnesota, and was we weren't the Rockefellers, but he was certainly a successful entrepreneur for a couple decades. It came time for him to exit the business, to sell the business, and what happened was people he was negotiating with stole the client list, which was, for an HVAC distributor, for an HVAC service provider, it's probably the most valuable asset that the business has. So that was stolen, and people put up a competitor 2 miles away.
Yeah.
Um, Ultimately, that which again, I don't care about technology for its own sake, but that theft uh, devalued his company by about 50%. So his life's work was half of it was really stolen
Yeah.
overnight. So this is before ransomware attacks, this is before anything really in terms of cybercrime, data security incidents, especially in the SMB, and it greatly affected his life. And yeah, so that's my passion for it. Is when I started in security, I quickly put those. I had some great leadership that taught me a lot of things, and I quickly put those pieces of the puzzle together. That whoa, this is what happened to my dad, but it's happening every day to SMB and mid
Affect
market
others.
and enterprise companies in the U.S. So that's my passion for, hopefully optimized cyber can help every business owner out there. But regardless, I'm here to help individuals and business owners and share knowledge, a lot of pro bono knowledge, um, because I frankly want to save want to help people like my dad, like that business, avoid the same kind of outcomes that I saw him go through.
And that's the beautiful thing about this industry too, Matt, right? There's a lot of people that are here to serve and here to share. That part about thought leadership is really what, is critical in this industry. In order people buy from those that they know, like, and trust. But more importantly, we need to help educate others to what we know that they might not know too, right? It's the reason we do this podcast, hopefully filling in the gaps for some of our customers, that are out there that just don't, know some of the topics that we're doing. But when we look at that thought leadership piece, it's critical to have that happy balance of what should be free and what should be for a fee too. And we'll get into a couple of your fee products and or fee approaches in a few moments. But before we head there, something that you said earlier kind of stuck with me. You fell into security and then you fell in love with it. A lot of our listeners are trying to make that crossover from traditional IT operations into cybersecurity. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what that original experience was like and what you were tasked with at the start of your cybersecurity journey.
Yeah, well, first I should address who, like, if you don't have a passion for security, you should not be in security. Um, we need more people in this fight. But if you don't wake up in the morning and get excited about being able to help American entrepreneurs, or wherever your listeners are, Australian entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
um, secure their business, their dream, then you should not be in this. You got to remember the why, right? The why any of us should be in this industry is to help people prevent financial losses, prevent losing their business to cyber attacks. If you start from that premise, uh, the how and the what gets super easy, right? Because you're mission focused, and I believe that customers and business owners understand the difference between people who have a cool new tool that you should buy. Maybe they even really believe in the tool. Um, no one wants to buy a new tool. No business owner wants to buy a new tool. They want, but they do care a lot about safeguarding their company from cyber attacks. It's all over the news and it's a real threat. So making that pivot, first, tell your clients, tell your prospects why. Why do we need to talk about IT security? Um, and that why is to keep their business open and keep them safe. From there, I would say the fundamentals are not, it's not rocket surgery in terms of the free stuff and the fundamentals you have to do.
Yep.
Let me give you an example. When I co-founded Optimize, I had a friend ask me, uh, he said, so you have some software that people pay you 300 grand and it keeps all the hackers out. And I told him that that was precisely the wrong way to think about security. That's not what security is. Security is that MFA code when you log into your bank account. It's checking email senders before you click on things. A lot of it is not secure. It's text messages that we all get on a daily basis. Uh, Emails from AT&T right now that are trying to steal your passwords. So largely it's about keeping your passwords, keeping your accounts safe, keeping people out of your accounts, and then not wiring money to bad guys.
Yep.
You do though, if you keep people out of your account and you don't wire money to bad guys, that that's going to keep you safe. So how we get there is so start with why and what we're fighting against, and then reverse engineer. Okay, keeping people out of my accounts. What do I need to do that? I need a password manager. I need somebody who's I need an MSP to manage my vulnerabilities, and manage my old devices, keep everything patched. Um, I need to roll out MFA everywhere. I need to take away privileges, all those things. But no business owner says, cool, I want to talk about multi-factor authentication. They want to talk about, how do I keep my money? So
Right. And I think that's a big component today, Matt, too, in the sense that everybody kind of looks at it from a fear, uncertainty, and doubt point of view, right? And everybody also has that false hope of that's not going to happen to me. I'm not big enough, or whatever the story might be. But we need to be having more of a risk conversation, right? And that's the beauty of where security is going to. For those that are looking to enter security, there's a technical path and there's really a business path too to it, like just like technology. And once you find what you're passionate for, what is that thing you wake up every morning to go into, you can find your direction on where you're going to work within the security spectrum. But for the customers, we got to help them understand, hey, here's where the risk lives. And this is the risk you're facing right now, and get away from that. It can happen to you conversation. But hey, here's where you're vulnerable right now. And you touched upon it. There's really four core pillars, if you will, of what we do in security, right? We're doing some continuous monitoring. We have email security. We obviously need to do training for our customers, and we have some asset governance. At least that's what springs to my mind as some core areas as well. And if we're doing that appropriately, we can really nail things down. And I'm assuming that's a lot of what your company is doing as well, helping with cyber hygiene, but then going into really understanding where the vulnerability points are.
Absolutely. So, I am not saying that cybersecurity is easy, but it is simple. So let's talk cyber risk, right? I always talk about three pillars of cyber risk. Um, Number one, what are you doing 24/7 from an IT security standpoint? This can be, some organizations have built this internally, uh, but for the vast majority of the SMB and mid market, this is your MSP, your service provider relationship that's helping you manage IT and security on a day to day basis. That means when something crazy happens, who do I call? What red flag goes up? Who's proactively addressing these things? Um, and who is keeping things tightened when new vulnerabilities do roll out. The second pillar, which is probably the most important, so this should have been my first pillar, but the second pillar is cyber insurance. When you have an incident, right? It's on average once every 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the publication. We want to have great security, so it's once every 40 years. But when that does happen, it's very, very expensive to remediate. You When you can buy $1 million policy for $1,500, we should do that. Nobody, the vast majority of people insure everything else. Just because this is IT does not mean we should not address it as such. So um, that's our second thing. The third point being, you talked about governance, the compliance governance. I really call it the risk management bucket.
Yep.
That's where I know VCIO Toolbox lives. That's where we live as well as the third-party risk assessors, third-party penetration testing. Um, so when I talk about cyber risk, I talk about those three. And when you talk to business owners and they say, "Oh, ransomware keeps me up at night," whatever keeps me up at night, my response is always why. If
Yep.
you do those three things to a strong degree, you can't guarantee that you'll never have a cyber incident, but I can guarantee that you're financially protected and that you're going to be okay through a cyber incident. So that's my approach to cyber risk, is try to keep it simple for the client, and also for us and all of our partners, every MSP out there that we partner with, keep everybody swimming in the right direction.
Yeah.
Where now the MSP is not fighting against the penetration testing firm that comes in, and neither of us are fighting against the insurance firm, because you need to balance all three. Um, yeah, you need to balance all three.
Yeah, and listeners, remember one of the things that insurance companies are hoping not to do is pay. So we need to have our house in order to make sure that when, unfortunately that claim event does need to be paid, that we've done all the right things to ensure that we can, what we can get what we require to continue business, continue operations as well. Now, I want to segue a little bit, Matt, into your domain expertise, right? You talked a little bit about that. You're doing some third party penetration testing, those kind of things for your customers. But maybe let's take a step back. A lot of people still confuse vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. Maybe you can give a little high level overview of how those two things differ, because that's a question I hear all the time, or a misconception I have from people. Yeah, I'm doing pen tests, I'm using this tool, and it's just a vulnerability scanner. So Maybe you can help the audience level set on that.
Correct. The number one difference is manual. A penetration test should be manual. I'm not saying 100%, just like the attackers, our
Yep.
ethical hacking team is using a combination of tools and manual efforts, but we see it every week on a different penetration test that tool finds one thing, human ingenuity gets you to the next level and is the entire game changer. Back in the incident response space, I can tell you for sure that they have levels to this and they're pivoting and using their best hackers to pivot and to come and attack you where the tools would indicate a dead end. So PCI recently released their 4.0 PCI DSS
Yep.
4.0, and they did a really good job. I'm paraphrasing here, so nobody you know write this in stone, but ultimately what they said is a penetration test is a manual exercise where an ethical hacker is going to emulate the behaviors and tactics, the tactics, techniques, and procedures of an attacker. Um, they also cautioned with two things that make it stand out as not a pen test. One being automated results, and two being if the penetration test does not find anything. Even the most secured environments should have some low and informational findings.
Yep.
Those are fine. Those are things a lot of businesses have accepted as risks. Um, but when tools spit out no results, that's a pretty good way for you to understand that it's just an automated script that's running. Um, versus when qualified, experienced OSCP certified professionals are doing a penetration test, there's always going to be some findings, even though hopefully they're low level ones that we don't largely need to worry about.
Yeah, and I think, that's a great distinction right there. And I think that's going to help a lot of the listeners really understand what the difference is because I've always looked at it. I used to run data centers, right? So we would go through we actually did biannual pen testing at the core level. And we would, that was a manual process. We wanted people to get in because we wanted to understand where those pathways might have existed. Whereas our vulnerability scanning, which was continuous and automated, was really keeping us up to date on things that were happening in real time that could lead to a bigger vulnerability down the road. And I think that's one of the bigger distinctions too, right? Not every CVE that comes out matters to you. So it was helping us correlate where there was potentially some risk brewing so our operational teams could take care of it. But the pen testing was then validating, are we doing what we could do best to our ability to then, drive off or maintain security?
Absolutely. One thing I'd love to add is I am in no way saying that vulnerability scanning, patching, and remediating is not the most important piece. That's more important, in my opinion,
Yep.
than penetration testing. That happening on an ongoing basis is critical for organizations to be better secured. But if you are going into the pen test bucket, don't pay pen test dollars for a vulnerability scan. Find the right firm that's doing manual testing that's going to find things that the scanner won't, because you want your pen test firm to find them and ultimately guide you through remediation, guide you, the client, and your MSP through remediation of those findings. Because if we don't find it, it's a latent risk that, knock on wood, it never happens, but ultimately someday an attacker is going to find those.
And I think that's a key piece right there too, man. It's that remediation piece. When you get a vulnerability scan, you may get some remediation steps, but it's pretty generic to the big picture issue, right? When you've got somebody that's doing a penetration test periodically, that remediation is to your environment. It's taking on the different configurations that you have within your environment and into account and giving you that true next step. And I think that's something that's very important to certain types of businesses. I'm a SaaS business. It's certainly important to me, right? So, that's something that the listeners should consider in this process as well. The remediation is great. I agree with you. Continuous vulnerability scanning has been a big difference. It goes so far beyond what just pure patch management does, which was, obviously the bread and butter of the MSP monitoring, framework for so many years, and really got us to that next step, started showing us where there were flaws and even assets that weren't in a negative space in the product life cycle management. But now you're talking about, this next level of it, which is really identifying where those gaps are in your environment and knowing a human went in there to try to find those gaps.
Absolutely. And I'll say two pieces on that. One, I talk a lot about our testing team. My co-founder is the brains of the operation, OSCP, CISSP,
Yeah.
DEF CON podium finisher with teams, led teams to that. But and all of our testing team is actually OSCP certified. But it's not just that those folks are great hackers. We're also looking for great consultants. So we want to be the folks that our MSP partners know are going to be there and guide remediation. Finding something is not helpful to an MSP or a business. What's helpful is to fix those things. So their infrastructure knowledge from our testing team is really, really critical to be able to guide our MSP partners in the right direction. Um, and one other piece that you just made me think of that I think is important is for a lot of MSPs out there, it's difficult to bring in a third party for penetration testing, even though we all know that you need to have that independence. The problem is the vast majority of ethical hacking firms, offensive security firms are competing with that MSP, are ultimately a threat to that MSP's
Yeah.
business. That's why when we created Optimize, we set out to solely focus on risk assessment and penetration testing. That's so we can be the third party to come in, do this test, do this assessment, guide that remediation for the MSP and the client. And our MSP partners know and have a level of comfort that, okay, I don't have to worry about Optimized Cyber stealing my vulnerability management contract or whatever contract you have with the client. So um, a lot of times people will give a bad rap to MSPs and MSSPs that try to do everything, right? Um, but sometimes they need to because pen test firms, offensive security firms are doing the same thing. So we're eating our own dog food a little bit by staying in our third prong, the risk management and testing piece, and not stepping into other areas where obviously you can make revenue. Because we want to be that independent testing assessment firm that helps make everyone better and helps make the whole security ecosystem better because now our MSP partners have that comfort to bring us in with no risk to losing the account.
And you talk about that. We were talking about this prior to recording today, the separation of kind of church and state in doing the penetration test. And I think, I put on my owner's hat. It's also a de-risking step for the MSP as well. We can't be holding both sides because all we can potentially do is miss something, right? And this gives us a check and balance system so we know where we got to remediate, but more importantly, helps validate how important we could even be from a services level to the customer because this work does need to get done. And that independent third party coming in there certainly will help with the cyber insurance conversation as well, because there will be less question into, are you sure? How did you approach this? What test did you use? Again, when the rooster's watching the hen house, it's really easy to take your foot off the gas and kind of do things a little bit more lax. And that's what the cyber insurers are trying to uncover when it comes time to pay a claim.
Yeah, I would completely agree with the de-risking. It's also a better client conversation, right? If Brian's my MSP and now you say you want to do a pen test and an assessment of my environment. Well, Brian, why do I need you to do that? If you already knew, or if there's holes here, why didn't you do it already? Right. So the whole purpose of a second set of eyes is to have a second set of eyes and to find things that maybe got overlooked from a prior MSP before you took over the contract. Or stood up a new firewall, or the client bought some new shadow IT that you didn't know about.
Yep.
And we are there to say, hey, these things need to get done. From a business standpoint, now Brian also can go in and say, I didn't say you have to do this. Optimize Cyber said you have to do these 4 remediation steps. Here's our statement of work to do these 4, or time and materials bill. Um, so ultimately, it seems like you're losing revenue when you bring in a third party, but ultimately it grows the pie and it actually grows revenue in more cases than not while delivering better security for the client.
Yeah, I know when I speak a lot to the more mature MSPs in our community, and it's certainly the way I felt when I was an MSP, there's right revenue and there's wrong revenue, right? And when you get to that point where you are no longer chasing every dollar, you realize, hey, there are things that are right for the customer. And bringing in a third party assessor, I think, is critical too, because you're letting the customer know, look, we're willing to be checked as well. Yes, they will find things. That's fact, that need to be safeguarded, but we want to make sure that we are hitting the major best practices, that the things that they're uncovering are hopefully minor indeed, and easy to remediate. I always likened it to, the story I would have with people that said, we can't be hacked back in the days before everybody realized you can be. And I'm like, well, the only way you're not going to be hacked is if you, disconnect everything from the internet, disconnect everything from the network, pull out all the plugs, and then turn off the circuit. Right? That's the only way it's going to work. But then we don't get anything done. So where do you want to meet in the middle, right? And this is really helping foster that conversation too, of hey, let's get a third party to tell us where the real critical risks are that we do need to remediate, but then also help us understand where are the things that might be a risk that you can accept, and it's not coming from the MSP.
Correct. And let's have a 90-page report from Optimized Cyber that's going to help us improve cyber risk today. It's going to help Brian's MSP service expand into vuln management, or maybe roll out a new EDR or MFA program, some kind of hardening work. Maybe it's just time and materials, but expand the client now to improve their security. And also, when that incident happens and the insurance claims team says, what was happening here at this organization? We've got, you're in VCIO toolbox with your notes as an MSP. The client has their practices, and there's the audit trail as well. But there's also this third party 90-page PDF that you can go and review,
Yeah.
claims team or attorneys that are inquiring, and say, look, obviously something went wrong. There was an incident, but in a world of 0 days and things like that, supply chain attacks, no one's impervious. What we're trying to do is show that we were what Brian's IT services then can show is, I was managing cyber risk for this client very well. Here's all the documentation. Here's the third party review. Maybe it was a risk that we accepted. More often than not, it's just something that went wrong, a clicked email, a 0 day, or a supply chain attack. Obviously, the difference with this kind of independence and documentation to support what you were doing on behalf of your client, now Brian looks like an asset. Brian was not
Yep.
the liability in this incident, and we can all save money on attorneys.
Well, it steps into what we feel is a huge market opportunity for the MSP today, and that's really adding that governance layer to the conversation. It's not being responsible for every aspect of security, because they probably shouldn't be, but helping the customer really build a cybersecurity program that has, regular reviews of policy, procedure, annual pen tests, all these critical steps that are core to having a good cyber hygiene and making sure that you're de-risking yourself so you have less claims, if not no claims, right? Turn that 1 in 4 years to 1 in 40, as you said earlier. And, obviously NIST 2.0, CSF 2.0 was released recently and brought governance into that conversation. So, it's really exciting that everybody's saying, hey, there's a way now to look over that, but it's also understanding you need to have multiple pieces, and you have to have a way to manage those pieces cohesively in a single program for a client in order to have it work effectively. And almost that guides you to where the third parties need to exist as well. I'm a big believer in third party pen testing because I want to know what we don't know.
Absolutely. I laugh every time we see the new graphic with govern that came into NIST 2.0, because um, it's very similar to, March Madness is going on right now, and I'm watching a lot of basketball. I guess it's April already, but it in hindsight, it looks like, okay, we had the shoes, the jerseys, we had some players, we had a basketball, we had a court, we were playing games. Now in the 2.0, we're also going to have a strategy. Like,
Yeah.
it's not as though govern is new to most people, or having a strategy for cyber risk is new. But it does make me laugh that we existed for so long without a structured, hey, let's have a governance unifying piece where We're going to take care of cyber risk, and we're going to bring in the right people at the right time, whether it's a firewall, whether it's an EDR technology, or whether it's optimized cyber for a penetration test.
I mean, if you look at a lot of those assessments, it talks about in various areas, regular reviews. And that's what governance is finally doing, is making sure that that actually happens, right? Because that was really the biggest part. People would set it, forget it, and lose track of time. I mean, as we're recording this, we're already in April. I thought it was New Year's 5 minutes ago, right? Time goes by quickly. So, this is really helping enforce things. Certainly nothing new. People have done that part of the puzzle. But I think what we're finally understanding is if we don't dictate the wrapper that should be going around every good cybersecurity program, we're missing the opportunity to make sure that things are actually happening, right? And I think that's where we're headed to. But it's a huge opportunity for the MSPs, and that's a way for them to augment some of that money that they might be earning through doing pen testing that they should be outsourcing to, right? There's always a new way to generate new revenue in our world, and if not, just wait until something else comes out.
Absolutely. Well, and it to bring it full circle to where we started, I think this is the great opportunity to go to your clients and become their governor, right? Now the
Yep.
governor's in there. Be the governor. You're not you're not an insurance carrier. You should not be writing insurance. You should have partners for insurance that you bring in. You should be core functionality for a lot that happens in terms of cyber defense. Um, but bring in the right third parties like Optimize Cyber on the pen testing front, um, the right audit firms, you should have relationships like that so your client can come to you um, as my coach, as my governor of cyber risk, who brings in the right third party at the right time, and ultimately start remembering, why are we doing this? You're doing this to help those clients prevent financial losses to cybercrime, period. They do not look at you and say, you're once people understand cyber risk, they don't look at you and say, it is your job, Mr. MSP, Mrs. MSP, to keep all the hackers out. We need the right team. And you are the quarterback, you're the governor of that team, and you're bringing in the right assets at the right time to manage cyber risk. Insurance is a part of that. Third party testing is a part of that. Your own tools, technologies, and offerings are a big part of that, probably the biggest part. Um, but the more that you can have the discussion of, why do we want to manage cyber risk, and that you are not too small for the risk. All of our biggest competitor is clients not wanting to manage cyber risk. It's not your MSP 4 miles over. It's not the client. It's not the firm that you bid against every single time a contract goes up. Your biggest risk as an MSP is clients throwing their hands up and saying, "This is too hard. Uh, I'm not going to do anything about this, and I'm too small, and I'm just going to bury my head in the sand." Keeping heads out of the sand should be the goal for everyone. So the more that we can keep this simple, keep this focused on preventing your business shutting down due to a cyber attack or losing money, because everyone now has a story. Every business owner either personally has a story or has friends that have their own story of losing money to cyber criminals. Um, so the more that you can become their go-to and be the people that they know care about this and will bring in the right people at the right time, the right tools, the right processes, and the right third parties, the more successful that I think your individual MSP can be, and certainly your clients.
Awesome. So, with that, I think we've come full circle on this conversation. I know we're getting near the end of our time too. So, Matt, a couple things I'd like you to do. First, tell people how they can get in touch with you. If they're looking for a third party testing partner, how can they get in touch with you and Optimize Cyber?
OptimizeCyber.com, or find me on LinkedIn, send a carrier pigeon, contact us on the forum. We'll be in touch shortly. And um, yeah, happy to have any conversations and explore this thing further with anybody out there. Also open to criticisms. Go to the website and say, "Hey, Matt, hated the podcast, but appreciate the willingness to share." So OptimizeCyber.com.
Terrific. And, before we step away and say goodbye for today, any closing thoughts, Matt, from your seat?
Yes. The only thing I care about, again, love our technology friends. I love the legal friends I work with, the insurance carriers. all the people in the cybersecurity world. I love you all. But I love Optimize Cyber, but I do not care about any of us individually. Remember, when you get up in the morning, you get to go share this like unique knowledge that no one else has about cyber risk and cybersecurity. Like, where would you rather be in the world than being able to address people's biggest concern? There was a Pew survey that came out, and I'll share this with you, Brian, if you want.
Sure.
They asked people about their biggest fears. Number one was identity theft. Number two was having money stolen from their bank accounts by cyber criminals. Getting murdered was like a third as high of a risk or of a concern to people that Pew Research found. So this is on people's top of mind. Once they find out that you are not there to sell them services, that you care about them, um, you're gonna become the new best friend to a lot of new clients and land a lot of folks.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I don't think much about getting murdered either, but here nor there. No, that's some great information. So with that, Matt, I want to say thank you for joining us today. For the listener, obviously this episode will be up anywhere you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio, as well as YouTube, if you want to see the video version and really see what goes on behind the scenes as well. Inside those show notes, we'll be including a link to Optimize Cyber as well as Matthew's LinkedIn account. So feel free to connect with him and ask some questions. And with that, listeners, I look forward to seeing you again next week. Matthew, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
You bet.